What's going to get you? And what can you do about it? Lions, tigers, bears? Oh my. Survival basics. I'm Rudy Bischoffen. Yeah, that's me over there. Oh, wait a minute. That's a little better, maybe. I'd like to talk a little philosophy with you before we get started. You see, my goal is to teach you to survive. And unlike most survival instructors, whose websites focus predominantly on wilderness survival, I want to take it more to where you live, the urban suburban metropolis. Now don't get me wrong, wilderness skills are excellent to study and learn. A popular phrase for these skills is bushcraft, a term that was coined in Australia. My tutorials will teach a new concept that I call burbcraft. That was coined by me. The techniques are largely the same, but the materials and tools differ somewhat. Burbcraft is a term for survival skills that are utilized in the civilized environment in the event of catastrophic disaster. Much like wilderness survival, burbcraft is based on the survival elements of shelter, fire, water, food, and protection from harm. However, burbcraft is about surviving and thriving in the urban-suburban environment ravaged by a natural or man-caused disaster. Burbcraft skills include shelter finding and building, fire starting, water collection, storage and purification, food procurement, storage and preparation, the use of tools such as knives, axes, saws, and modern fire starters, firearms, scavenging, and container construction from found man-made materials. Burbcraft skills are similar to primitive wilderness survival skills, only they're practiced in the devastated remains of the civilized world. My style of survival instruction is based on the methods of the primitive man, inculcated with the innovations of the modern man, and combined with teachings from our natural friends. For example, bushcraft versus burbcraft. Perhaps the backbone of all bushcraft skills is the art of making a bow drill fire starting device, and making one from all natural materials. It is a very valuable skill to learn, but it is difficult and it can consume much time and energy. The burbcraft equivalent is the modern ferrocerium fire starter. The learning curve is much quicker, and this device is very efficient and quick. The object is to have one available at all times. But fire is critical to both bushcraft and burbcraft. Let's talk for just a minute about these two particular four-footed brothers, because we can learn from them. The coyote and the badger are great examples of what a survivor should be. They both have the best characteristics of a survivor. They are adapters and cooperators. Both of these animals have survived the onslaught of civilization on their habitats. The coyote just trots down your street and raids your garbage can. No worries, it's all good. The badger digs himself into a hole and refuses to budge. And did you know that these guys have been known to hunt together? The coyote chases the prey down a hole, the badger digs him out, and they share the meal. Yeah, they can teach us a thing or two. Now let's get started. December 31st, 2010, New Year's Eve. Multiple tornadoes struck the central United States. 9 dead, hundreds homeless. Before you can effectively build a plan of emergency preparedness and survival for immediate situations or for long-term durations, you should have a very basic understanding of the nature of the beast. In other words, what is it that will take away your life? What are you surviving against? What will get you? It's not always lions, tigers, and bears. In certain situations it could be, but generally the dangers to survival are much less glamorous and really kind of common. To understand what I'm talking about, consider the basic needs of the human body. What are the things that our bodies need to survive? What does that little guy over there need to live and grow old? I can think of at least 6 things. Can you? Well, here's my 6. Clean air, love, pure water, protection from harm, a constant 98.6 degree body temperature, and food. If deprived of these 6 basic needs for varying lengths of time, he will die. So how long does he have? Now this is kind of scary, as we all want this little fella to make it, but facts are facts, and if his needs aren't met in a certain amount of time, He just won't. So what are the time factors involved here? For the 6 basic needs, how long can you survive without water, air, protection from harm, food, love, and a 98.6 degree body temperature? Water, about 3 days. Air, about 3 minutes. Protection from harm, anywhere from 3 seconds to, depends on what's going to get you. Food, about 3 weeks. Love, who knows? But really, you've got to have it. 98.6 degree body temperature, about 3 hours, plus or minus 10 degrees. Do you see some priorities developing here? Well, let's prioritize. First, let's consider what I call the unvariables. Air, 3 minutes. 98.6 temperature, 3 hours. Water, 3 days. Food, 3 weeks. And now the variables. Love. Now you might think I'm being silly with this one, and maybe you're right, but if a human being were to be completely deprived of love as an infant, he would die in a period of time. As adults, having made it this far, we can probably do just fine without it for a long while. However, there is a survival defense for this need that can be addressed in planning for emergency preparedness and survival, but I'll leave it here for now. Protection from harm. Depending on the situation, this could be a first priority, a last priority, or somewhere in between. For example, if you're bleeding profusely from a major artery, you may only have seconds to live. You must apply first aid tactics immediately. If you're being attacked by a vicious animal or a deranged person, you must have an immediate response. Other dangers may take a long time to cause harm. I call these floaters. Put them wherever you might need them, but don't forget them. Let's define these basic priorities in regards to survival. Air. If the air around you becomes contaminated, there's not much you can do other than remove yourself from the toxic area. If the bad area is too large, you're in trouble. You can only hold your breath for about 3 minutes. There are protective masks that can be purchased and kept in your survival kit. They can be bulky and expensive, but they're not a bad idea. They're a little funny looking, perhaps. The 98.6 degree body temperature, this danger is medically defined as either hypo, which means low, or hyper, which means high, thermia. In other words, low or high body temperature. Either can be fatal in as little as 3 hours with a plus or minus 10 degrees of change. Both can cause problems in judgment and rationality with lesser temperature variations. They are serious enemies that require immediate attention in a survival plan. You must provide a means for maintaining a constant body temperature. From now on, this will be called shelter, which I will cover as a separate topic shortly. Water. You will need a replenishable source of clean, pure water. You'll need minimally 1 quart per day, and perhaps as much as 1 gallon per day, depending on environmental temperatures and rate of activity. Without water for 3 days' duration or more, the body can become seriously impaired and even die. Food. Technically, you can last for up to 3 weeks or more without a bite to eat. Your existence, however, will not be very pleasant. And hunger has a very direct effect on your attitude, and your positive survivor's attitude is your best asset. You'll learn about that in a subsequent lesson. So without food, your attitude could be in jeopardy and your survival chances could be lessened. In addition, without food, your energy will be depleted, which will make the problem even worse. You must have an immediate high-energy food supply and some means for getting more. Now, if you can figure out how to get a pizza in your survival kit, let me know about it. I'd love to know. Protection. This is a fairly wide topic and runs the gamut from band-aids to bullets. But there are many things that could endanger your health, well-being, and even your life. You will need to consider and provide for these possibilities. So, we've determined the unvariable survival priorities to be air, body temperature, water, and food, with protection and love as variables. Let's factor these down into a more concise packet. Now, there's not much that you can do about air and love, so let's take them out of the equation for right now. Then the remaining priorities are body temperature, water, food, and protection. Now, I'd like to rename some of these a little bit for simplification and make an addition. The constant body temperature priority we will call shelter, because things that provide shelter will help us to preserve that constant temperature. The protection priority we will rename as tools, because tools are the implements that we will use to provide for our safety and well-being. Now, let's add a new priority that is a vital contributor to each of the other priorities: fire, because it is useful as a provider of warmth, a means of water purification, cooking food, and it can be a protective device. And it's great for your attitude. So, our priorities are now shelter, fire, water, food, and tools. But I'd like to rearrange them a little bit more. I am a firm believer in having survival tools at hand at all times. How can you provide for your well-being without them? So I want to convince you to make that number one on your priority list, at least in considering your preparations. So, now we have tools, shelter, fire, water, and food. So fix this in your mind and start thinking about how you're going to put together a survival kit that will take care of you and yours in a tough situation. Now, I'm a big fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. And I found in reading through that wonderful novel that there are some survival lessons that we can learn from Middle-earth. So let's journey to part 2.